He was the one, the model student, the son every parent wished for, the man who followed the map, every single inch of it. They called his life the blueprint for success. He checked every box society held out for him and then some. Yet here we are, asking the most terrifying question, the one he never dared to whisper, even to himself. Life of a man who did everything society told him to. Watch this before it's too late. What if the map was a lie? The story begins not with a tragedy, but with an irony. His name doesn't matter. Let's call him Alexander. From the time he was old enough to hold a crayon, Alexander learned one simple, immutable truth. Compliance brings comfort. He was praised for coloring inside the lines, for sitting perfectly still while the other kids squirmed, for raising his hand with textbook precision. He mastered the art of being wanted. Not who he was, but who the system demanded him to be. The quiet, obedient boy was rewarded by the system. Not for creativity, not for critical thought, but for order. When he aced the tests, when he won the academic awards, the applause felt like substance. He traded his curiosity for approval, his wild, unvoiced dreams for a polished report card. He didn't realize that in mastering the rules, he was also mastering the art of self-imprisonment. Think about it. Look at your own journey. When you were told to pick a major, did you ask what ignited your soul or what had the highest starting salary? Alexander chose engineering, not because he loved the complex machinations, but because the word responsible glowed on the degree like a sacred virtue. Everyone nodded. Everyone approved. His parents beamed. The path was set, paved with sensible choices. It all made sense. And that's the insidious part, because sense is the enemy of meaning. He climbed the corporate ladder with the quiet dedication of a man in a trance. Always early, never late, his tie straight, his answers prepared. He was the efficient, predictable cog that HR departments adore. He bought the house, a modest, respectable split level, married the good woman, had the 2.5 children, posted the perfect smiling Christmas photo with a caption about gratitude. He was the model adult, the one who never disappointed, the one who never strayed. But under the surface, a quiet voice, a barely audible whisper, began to stir in the dead of night. Is this all there is? He dismissed it. He buried it under more work, more responsibilities, more bills to pay. He convinced himself that discomfort was just the cost of maturity, that the ache in his chest was simply the weight of being a provider. He was so proud of never getting lost that he never stopped to ask where the path actually led. This quiet tragedy has a name in psychology, the default mode life. Living by habit, by programming, by fear of disrupting the fragile peace he had built. He never had to be forced into this life. He enforced it upon himself. He locked the doors, built the walls, and called the cage he was in freedom. If you feel that slight rising discomfort now, that flicker of recognition in your own chest, then this story isn't about Alexander. It's about you. Before we dive deeper into the terrifying psychological forces at play, the ones that turn free men into willing slaves, take a single deep breath and consider hitting that subscribe button now. Join us, follow this journey, because the truth we are about to uncover is the key to unlocking your own freedom. Don't let this revelation vanish into the endless scroll of the internet. We'll be right back. When Alexander began to feel the hollowness, he assumed he was simply ungrateful. How could a man who possessed so much, the comfortable life, the respect of his peers, the stable career, feel so profoundly empty? He didn't understand that he wasn't suffering from a lack of success. He was suffering from a lack of self. To understand this quiet devastation, we have to look back, far past his graduation ceremony, past his first big promotion, past even his schoolyard days. We have to look at the ancient and terrifying truth that has haunted thinkers for millennia. 500 years ago, a young French philosopher named Étienne de la Boétie wrote a chilling essay called Discourse on Voluntary Servitude. La Boétie argued that the most dangerous form of control isn't force, but consent. He said a tyrant doesn't need to lift a finger or wield a whip if the subjects police themselves. Alexander wasn't dragged into servitude. He was raised into it. He was smiled into it. He was rewarded into it. He was taught to be a good boy, then a good student, then a good employee, then a good citizen. The chains weren't made of iron. They were made of virtues: responsibility, humility, stability. He accepted them because he was conditioned to call them noble. This conditioning begins in the very places we are told to seek enlightenment. Consider the educational systems across the world. A vast majority of school assessments measure compliance and memorization. Only a sliver encourages critical or creative thinking. For most of his formative years, Alexander wasn't learning how to think. He was learning how to obey. He was rewarded for asking safe questions, for writing neatly, and for staying quiet. He learned to play the game long before he even knew it was a game. He internalized this obedience so deeply that he became his own supervisor, his own ruthless guard. He didn't need external punishment because the fear of disappointing others, his parents, his boss, his neighbors, was a stronger, more constant consequence. This is learned compliance, the terrifying process of confusing your own thoughts with the thoughts that were handed to you. He thought he was disciplined. He was just conditioned. He thought he was free. He was just well-adjusted. But why? If no one held a gun to his head, why didn't he question it? Why did he never even once stop and ask, is this mine? The answer lies not in laws, but in the crowd. Jump forward to 1895. Gustave Le Bon published his seminal work, The Crowd, a study of the popular mind. Le Bon argued that when individuals gather in a group, their critical thinking shuts down. They stop thinking and start repeating. They confuse repetition for truth and conformity for morality. Alexander grew up in this subtle tyranny. He saw what his peers valued, what they posted, what they applauded, and he mirrored it back. He chased the bandwagon effect. He didn't want to seem weird. He didn't want to seem irresponsible. He certainly didn't want to seem unstable. Society never had to punish him for thinking differently. It just had to make him afraid of being alone. Think of the famous Asch conformity experiments of 1951. People were asked to match line lengths, an obvious task. Yet, when everyone else in the room gave the wrong answer, 75% of participants followed the crowd. They chose to betray their own eyes rather than stand alone. That was Alexander's life, a series of approvals. What opinion won't cause trouble at dinner? What car feels respectable? What career looks normal? He shaped himself not on conviction, but on what would keep him invisible within the crowd. The human need to belong, the most primitive, powerful urge, had proven stronger than the need to be free. He was not brainwashed. He was just well adjusted to a world that rewards those who never ask why. On paper, he was a winner. He had the house, the family, the prestige. He was the man whose life looked stable, whose choices looked wise. But success, as it turns out, can be tragically good at hiding failure. Not a failure on a resume, but a failure in the only place that matters, inside. Alexander was empty. If this terrifying echo of his life resonates with your own experience, if you've ever felt that chilling question rise in your throat, is this me talking, or is it just the system talking through me? Pause for a moment. Don't scroll away. Don't dismiss this as just another motivational video. What you are witnessing is a silent crisis, a profound loss of soul. And if you're finding truth in these words, then you need to hit that follow button now. Share this, because the final devastating act of Alexander's story, and the only way to avoid his fate, is what we must confront next. Alexander's emptiness was not a dramatic breakdown. It wasn't a sudden crisis. It was a slow erosion. A process so quiet he barely noticed it happening until one morning he woke up in his well-earned, well-furnished home and felt nothing. Not pain, not sadness, just a terrifying blank absence. He had everything, yet it felt like nothing. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, a survivor of the Holocaust, named this condition the existential vacuum, a deep, silent void that comes from living without purpose, even when all outward appearances suggest stability. It's not about failure, it's about absence, the absence of self. He realized he could not remember the last time he did something because he wanted to, not because it was expected. Every major choice, his career, his home, his hobbies, had been filtered through the boundaries of what others approved of. He hadn't lived a bad life, he just never got around to living his own. Then came the terrifying question, the one that broke through the conditioning. If I lost my job, what would be left of me? Not financially, not logistically, but in the human sense. If the title dissolved, if the role disappeared, what would remain? Had he spent so many years becoming what society wanted that his real self was buried somewhere under the accumulated layers of conformity? When your identity is built entirely on function, what happens when you are no longer useful? He saw the tragic irony. He was the man who had it all, the one others looked up to. How could he admit, even to his wife, that deep down he felt lost? The world does not give space for that confession, not if you are a man over 40. You are expected to be solid, settled, stoic, the strong one. This silence has a deadly cost. The CDC numbers are chilling. In the US, men between the ages of 45 and 64 account for a disproportionate percentage of all suicides. These are the men who look fine, who smile at barbecues, who pay the bills on time, the ones who never say a word. Men are not taught how to hurt out loud. They are taught to fix, to handle, to swallow it down. So when the weight gets too heavy, they don't reach out. They disappear. Alexander's despair didn't look like tears. It looked like silence, like a man who was there, but not really. And then one morning, the final, most devastating thought landed in his chest like an unbearable weight. I don't have time to start over. Not because of his age, but because of momentum. He had spent his entire life moving in one direction, and the thought of turning around felt utterly impossible. He had succeeded at building a life that never belonged to him. He had become the man everyone could depend on except himself. In the end, there was no drama, no headlines. He didn't collapse. He didn't scream. He simply faded the way he lived, quietly, respectably, without disturbance. His obituary was tasteful. People said nice things. Hardworking man, reliable, all-around good guy, but no one had much to say at all. Because the truth was, no one truly knew him, not the man underneath the layers. The real him never showed up. He made it his life's mission to never cause problems, to never rock the boat, to never make too much noise. And he succeeded. But silence has a cost. What he left behind wasn't a legacy, it was paperwork. He followed the script right up to the end, never changing a line, never asking if the story was even worth telling. That kind of death is far more terrifying than failure, because failure at least means you tried something. It means you reached for something real. But Alexander didn't fail. He simply faded, and the world barely noticed. So if you are listening to this now, if you feel the echo of this man's life in your own, don't turn away. Don't tell yourself, well, I'm not that far gone. That's what he told himself, year after year, until the years were gone. The good news is, you are still here. The story isn't over. Not yet. You still have time to stop performing, to stop complying, to stop chasing someone else's definition of what a man should be. You still have time to ask the question he never did. Who would I be if I didn't care what they thought? If something in you feels off, if you have done everything right and still feel profoundly wrong, that is not failure. That is a signal. A whisper from the part of you that refuses to die politely. You don't have to vanish. You can still live, but first, you have to stop following and start remembering who you were before they told you who to become.